January 2010. Somewhere in the ruthless backroads of Sinaloa, Hugo Hernandez was ripped apart. When what was left of him surfaced in Los Mochis, even veteran investigators froze. This wasn't just murder. It was a statement soaked in blood. Here's some of the most disturbing cartel murders of all time. November 27th, 1989. Just minutes after takeoff, a violent explosion rips through Avianca Flight 203, sending metal and bodies scattering over a Colombian hillside. Chaos erupted below. Little did they know this deadly act was orchestrated by Colombia's most feared criminal mastermind. When you think of Pablo Escobar, you probably picture the drunk kingpin with billions in cash, hippos in his backyard, and a ruthless streak that made him both a legend and a monster. But one of the darkest chapters in Escobar's reign came on that exact day, when Avianca Flight 203 exploded midair, killing 107 innocent people. And believe it or not, this wasn't just a random act of terror. It was personal. It was calculated. It was Escobar at his most unhinged. At the time, Escobar was at war with the Colombian government over extradition. He feared being sent to the US more than anything, and he was willing to burn the whole country down to avoid it. So when he learned that Cesar Gaviria, a presidential candidate who supported extradition, might be flying on Avianca Flight 203, Escobar saw an opportunity and acted without hesitation. He ordered his men to plant a bomb on the plane. But the truly chilling part? Gaviria wasn't even on board. He sent innocent lives to their deaths without a second thought, knowing he'd never be in harm's way himself. The intel was wrong, yet that didn't stop Escobar from following through. The bomb went off just minutes after takeoff from Bogota, turning that Boeing 727 into a fiery wreck. Everyone on board died. Business people, tourists, and even kids. All for a political message that didn't even hit his intended target. The explosion shocked Colombia and the world. It was one of Escobar's most public and horrifying acts, and it showed just how far he'd go to protect himself. He didn't care about collateral damage, he wanted chaos, and he wanted fear. The US and Colombian governments responded hard. The bombing helped turn Escobar from a drug trafficker into enemy number one. It also pushed Gaviria, who survived and eventually became president, to go all in hunting Escobar down. This wasn't just a drug war anymore. It was a war for Colombia's soul. Eventually, Escobar's world crumbled. He was killed in 1993, but the scars from what he did, including the Avianca bombing, never really healed. Families were shattered, the violence escalated, and the image of that fiery mid-air explosion still haunts many Colombians to this day. Escobar once claimed to be a man of the people, but with Avianca Flight 203, he proved he was something much darker, someone willing to wipe out dozens of lives to silence a single voice. January 2010. Along the dusty roads of Sinaloa, Hugo Hernandez's body was torn apart. By the time what remained was found in Los Mochis, even the most seasoned investigators couldn't believe their eyes. Let's back up. Hugo wasn't a high-ranking cartel boss nor a big-time informant. He was just caught in the wrong web at the wrong time. His brother had ties to a rival cartel, one the Sinaloa cartel was at war with. And as cartels often do when they want to send a message, they went after his family. Hugo was abducted, held captive, and tortured for days. But what came next was so twisted it made international headlines. When authorities found his body, it had been dismembered, his arms and legs hacked off, torso mutilated, and most horrifying of all, his face had been completely peeled off. And then came the final insult. His flayed face was stitched onto a soccer ball, a distorted mask placed beside his body in a public square. His torso was stuffed in a plastic bag, his limbs were scattered like garbage, and his head was left in the streets, topped with a narco note that came as a warning saying,
"Happy New Year, because this will be your last."
Yeah, that was their idea of a holiday message. The symbolism wasn't subtle. Cartels love spectacle. But this wasn't just about making people afraid. It was about humiliation. Hugo wasn't just killed. He was dehumanized. His identity, his literal face, was ripped away and turned into a prop. It sent a terrifying signal. We can erase you, and we'll enjoy doing it. At the time, Mexico was neck-deep in cartel warfare. The Sinaloa cartel, led by El Chapo, was trying to crush its rivals, while also fending off the military. This era gave birth to some of the most grotesque murders in cartel history, and Hugo stood out even amongst all that madness. His death became a symbol of how far things had spiraled, not just another body count. This was psychological warfare, the kind meant to break communities, silence enemies, and remind everyone who held the power. And to this day, the image of a man's face sewn onto a soccer ball remains one of the most horrifying reminders of what the cartels are truly capable of.
¿Cuánto tiempo estuviste haciendo todo esto?
Como 9, 10 años.
Y en ese tiempo, ¿cuántos cuerpos deshiciste?
300.
In Tijuana, after his sister was brutally assaulted by cartel members, something inside him snapped. What followed was a descent into horrifying violence, driven by revenge. Crime so disturbing they drew the eye of authorities and ultimately sealed his fate. Ever hear a nickname that makes your skin crawl? El Pozolero, or the Stew Maker. It's not just a cartel alias, it's what he did. His job? Dissolve human bodies in acid, like ingredients in a pot of stew. His real name? Santiago Meza Lopez, and he wasn't just some flashy cartel assassin. He was the cleanup crew. Working out at Tijuana, Meza handled disappearances for the Arellano Felix cartel, one of Mexico's most violent criminal organizations. And while others pulled the trigger, he handled what came next. Stuffing bodies into industrial barrels and melting them into nothing. The mixture he used was a blend of hot water and caustic lye, strong enough to dissolve everything down to teeth and bone fragments. Meza later admitted he did this to over 300 victims, though many believe the number is much higher. And what's even sicker, he never saw himself as a killer. He once said,
I only did the cleaning.
He was disturbingly methodical. He wore gloves, he followed steps. He had barrels, chemicals, and patience. Bodies would dissolve over 24 to 48 hours, leaving behind a foul, unrecognizable mush. That was dumped into pits, drainage, even fields. Sometimes the only thing left behind was a single tooth. Meza's nightmare factory was discovered in 2009. When authorities arrested him, he calmly explained everything. How he worked, where he worked, and how many bodies he handled. He even led him to his dumping ground, which became known as the Narco Graveyard. Forensic teams sifted through the sludge, recovering bone shards and teeth, confirming the horrifying scale of his work. And here's the truly tragic part. For the families of the missing, El Pozolero didn't just erase bodies. He erased closure. There were no remains to bury, no proof of death, no goodbyes. Just questions that'll never be answered. In a world of brutal executions and over-the-top cartel violence, El Pozolero's horror stood out, 'cause it was slow, calculated, and quiet. He didn't make headlines with explosions nor shootouts. He made people vanish, completely, forever. And that's what made him one of the most disturbing figures in cartel history.
Alejandro Arcos, the mayor of the southwestern Chilpancingo city, was killed less than a week after taking office.
October 6th, 2024. In Chilpancingo, an abandoned pickup truck sat on a desolate road. The engine was cold, the windows shattered. But what caught everybody's attention was that human head resting on the hood. A grim message. Inside, slumped in the driver's seat, was Mayor Alejandro Arcos. This wasn't some low-level political figure. Arcos had just been sworn in 6 days earlier as the mayor of Chilpancingo, the capital of Guerrero, Mexico, one of the country's most violent and cartel-ridden states, mind you. He had come into office with big promises, restoring security, taking back the neighborhoods from the criminals, standing up to drug gangs. But in Guerrero, those kinds of promises can be deadly. Alejandro knew the game. He reportedly turned down a federal security detail, perhaps wanting to stay close to the people, or maybe underestimating just how dangerous things had gotten. On the day he died, he left his home for a meeting in Petaquillas, an area known to be under heavy cartel influence. He went alone. He never came back. His mutilated body was found inside a truck. His severed head had been carefully placed on the hood as if it were on display. No one needed to guess who was responsible. This was the calling card of organized crime in Mexico. This was a message. But it wasn't just about Arcos. His murder was political theater, designed to show everyone watching, local officials, law enforcement, even the new president, that cartels can still call the shots in many parts of the country. President Claudia Sheinbaum, only recently elected, had promised sweeping reforms and new strategies to tackle cartel violence. But Arcos' killing was a grim reminder that no amount of policy nor police presence means safety when entire regions are under the shadow of organized crime. What's particularly disturbing here is how publicly and calculated the murder was. This wasn't a shootout nor a robbery gone wrong, but an execution, cold, deliberate, symbolic. A statement that no one, not even a newly elected mayor in the capital city of Guerrero, is untouchable. And that's what makes Alejandro Arcos' murder so scary. It wasn't just the brutality, it was the boldness, the idea that a man could be elected one week and decapitated the next, not in secret, but in broad daylight, for the whole country to see. This wasn't just a murder, it was a warning.
The former mayor of a small town west of Mexico City stood up to drug traffickers and paid with her life.
Maria Santos Grastieta had already survived 2 assassination attempts, but 2 weeks ago, she was ambushed and abducted while driving with her daughter. Her body was found.
November 12th, 2012. Maria was behind the wheel, dropping her daughter off at school, when a group of armed men suddenly blocked her path. She pled for her child's safety. The girl was spared. But as for Maria, she met an ugly fate. And when you hear the phrase, bravery in the face of death, it almost sounds like a movie line. But for Maria Santos Grastieta, it was daily life. She wasn't just a doctor, nor a mother, or even a politician. Maria was a symbol of resistance in Mexico's brutal war against the cartels. But standing up to them came with a price so devastating, it would shake the entire country. Maria was the mayor of Tiquicheo, a small town in Michoacan, right in the heart of cartel territory. And when she took office in 2008, the region was already under siege by violent drug gangs like La Familia Michoacana. Most politicians played it safe, look the other way, stay quiet, maybe even take a bribe. Maria, she stood her ground, and the cartels noticed. The first time they tried to kill her, she was traveling with her husband. Gunmen opened fire on their car. Maria was wounded, but her husband didn't make it. But instead of hiding, Maria did the opposite. She recovered, she grieved, and then she kept working. Then came a second attack, and yet again she survived. More scars, more pain, but still she showed up. And what set her apart wasn't just her survival, it was how open she was about the cost. Maria shared photos of her injuries, deep wounds, surgical scars, and a body stitched together by sheer will. Most politicians would cover that up, but Maria wanted the world to see what standing up looked like. After her term ended, the threats didn't stop. She kept receiving warnings. But she refused to leave Mexico, even when offered asylum elsewhere. Her message was clear.
I'm not afraid. I have to keep fighting for my children, for my country.
In November 2012, that nightmare caught up to her. Now, she was kidnapped in broad daylight while dropping her daughter off at school. Witnesses said she begged her attackers to let the girl go, and they did. But Maria was taken. Days later, her body was found on the side of a rural road, tortured, burned, beaten. The same woman who had survived 2 assassination attempts was finally silenced. But even in death, she left behind something the cartels couldn't destroy. Her voice. her legacy, and her example. Maria Santos Gorostieta didn't just die a martyr, she lived like a warrior. And while the cartels may have taken her life, they couldn't take away the power of what she stood for. Courage over fear, even when that fear was death itself. May 16, 1992. Just past midnight in Culiacan, Chalino finished his show when men in suits flashed a badge, asking for a little chat. He followed and might have realized he was walking straight into his own execution. Chalino Sanchez always knew his songs could get him killed, but for him, telling the truth was worth the risk. Before he was a legend, Chalino was a kid from a dirt-poor ranch in Sinaloa. Life was hard, his family scraped on by, and violence was part of the scenery. At 15 years old, his life changed forever when his sister was allegedly raped by a local man with cartel ties. Not long after, that man turned up dead, and people whispered Chalino had something to do with that. Whether that's true or not, Chalino ran to the US right after. He crossed into California and lived rough, working odd jobs, washing dishes, anything to stay alive. But he didn't leave Mexico behind. He brought it with him in his music. He started writing corridos, gritty ballads about drug traffickers, revenge, and blood feuds. He sang the things most people were too afraid to even say out loud. His rise was raw and real. No fancy studio deals here. Chalino handed out cassette tapes at swap meets and car shows, and people felt it. He wasn't just telling stories. He was living them. But being the voice of the underworld came with enemies, and in January 1992, during a show at Coachella, someone walked up and shot him on stage. Chalino, bleeding, pulled out his own gun, fired right back. Oh, he survived. Barely. Then came that one night in Culiacan. Oh, he just performed at Salon Bugambillas, even after being handed an alleged death threat. Seriously. The crowd loved it. It was electric. But when those men in the suit asked Chalino to come with them, something felt off here. And still Chalino went. The next morning, fishermen would find his body dumped by a canal. Blindfolded, wrist-bound, 2 bullets to the back of the head. A textbook execution, cold and final. No one was ever arrested. No charges, no answers, just silence. Some say he was killed for dissing the wrong cartel. Others believe he got too close to secrets he shouldn't have sung about. Maybe it was revenge for something personal, but that truth is buried deep with his body. Now, Chalino Sanchez didn't just die. He became a myth, and to this day he's remembered as the man who sang the truth and paid for it with his life. In the world of narco corrido, no one ever did it more real than Chalino. September 24th, 2011. Before the sun rose over Nuevo Laredo, a mutilated body was dumped at a busy intersection, limbs scattered, a handwritten note pinned nearby. At the bottom, 4 Z's. The brutal signature of the Zetas Cartel. But this wasn't a cop nor a rival. It was Nena de Laredo, a small-time vlogger who, with a few keystrokes, made enemies out of monsters. And they made sure the world saw what happened to those who speak out. Marisol Macias Castañeda, better known online by her persona Nena de Laredo, or La Nena de Laredo, was a trailblazer in a time when speaking out could cost you your life. She was the editor-in-chief of Primera Hora, a local newspaper in Nuevo Laredo. But behind the scenes, she was a fearless citizen journalist, using social media to warn the public about cartel activity, shootouts, and roadblocks. Marisol provided a voice where many feared to speak. Now, by the time Marisol took on this dangerous role, traditional media outlets in Mexico had already been silenced by constant threats, kidnappings, and even assassinations. Many newsrooms simply stopped reporting on cartel violence. So Marisol turned to Nuevo Laredo en Vivo, a platform where locals could share warnings and updates on cartel activity in real time. For many, it was a lifeline. a space where they could express themselves anonymously and safely, or so they thought. The Zetas, one of Mexico's most brutal cartels, were watching, and they weren't about to let her post freely. Marisol's courageous work was risky, and she was abducted, brutally murdered, and left with her head severed and placed on a stone monument. A chilling display meant to send another brutal message. Alongside her body were keyboard, cables, and discs, directly linking her death to her online activism. The cartel even left a handwritten note, clearly aimed at anyone who else dared to speak out.
Nuevo Laredo and Vivo on social networking sites. I'm the Laredo girl, and I'm here because of my reports. And yours. These happened because of my actions, for trusting in the Army and Navy. Thank you for your attention. Respectfully, Laredo girl.
Marisol wasn't even an investigative journalist at Primera Hora. She was an administrative worker, yet the Zetas discovered her identity, leading to her tragic death. Her murder sent shockwaves throughout the online community, and while many felt outraged, fear quickly took over. Her assassination marked a dangerous shift in how cartels viewed social media activism, and she became the first known victim of cartel killing directly tied to online reporting. The message was clear. No one was safe, not even those working outside traditional media. Marisol's death was only the beginning. Other journalists and online activists in Nuevo Laredo followed, and many soon learned the price of sharing the truth. January 5th, 2015. A photo hit the internet like a warning shot. A young woman, barely in her 20s, dressed in black and gripping an assault rifle like it was a part of her. She looked thin, almost breakable, but the bulletproof vest and the Niño tattoo on her forearm told a different story. That was Jocelyn Alejandra Niño, La Flaca. And that photo, it didn't just get attention. It marked her. From that moment on, her fate was sealed. It wasn't just a flex. It was a message. Jocelyn wasn't some social media cosplayer. She was allegedly part of Los Ciclones, a deadly faction of the Gulf Cartel operating out of Tamaulipas, Mexico. Her job? Defend cartel turf, especially from rival gangs like Los Metros. In a world where brutality is currency, she was rising fast. La Flaca literally means the skinny one, but it carried a darker double meaning. In narco culture, it's also a nickname for Santa Muerte, the saint of death, worshipped by many who walk the line between life and bullets. Whether she saw herself that way or not, it seemed fitting. She was a symbol, young, lethal, and loyal to the cartel. But in that world, fame is a death sentence. That viral photo, rumored to have been leaked by rivals, painted a giant target on her back. Once your face is known, the countdown begins, and 3 months later, it hit zero. On April 13, 2015, a grim discovery was made in a parking lot in Matamoros. Inside a cooler were the dismembered remains of 3 people. One of those bodies was Jocelyn. Authorities confirmed her identity thanks to that same tattoo. The scene was brutal. Her limbs were severed, her body stuffed in a box like discarded meat, and next to her, a handwritten message from Los Metros that basically said, "This is what happens to those who ride with Los Ciclones." It was a clear warning. Jocelyn had become a pawn in the Gulf Cartel's internal war, a rivalry that didn't care about gender, status, or how deep your loyalty ran. Her death shocked people, not just because of the violence, but because she had become the face of a new kinda narco soldier. A young female and terrifyingly fearless man. In the end, she might have been disposable, just another name crossed out in red ink in Mexico's cartel wars. But the scariest part, in that world, there's always another La Flaca waiting in the wings. December 30th, 2009. Jose Luis Romero had just stepped out to grab some dinner when masked gunmen surrounded him, dragged him into an SUV, and disappeared into the night. A veteran crime reporter in Los Mochis, man, Romero knew the risks. Reporting on cartels was like dancing through a minefield, and this time he wouldn't make it back. Now, Jose wasn't just any journalist. He'd been covering organized crime for over 2 decades, and he didn't shy away from that ugly truth. He'd been with Linea Directa for about 10 years, and everyone knew he had guts. Oh, he wasn't afraid to report on cartel violence, even when everyone else had learned to stay quiet. And that bravery, it cost him everything. Just hours after Jose was kidnapped on December 30th, 2009, something even more chilling happened. Jesus Escalante Leyva, the chief investigator on Jose's disappearance, was shot and killed right outside his office. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a warning. The message from the cartels was loud and clear. Dig too deep, and you'll end up dead. For over 2 weeks, there was nothing but silence. No clues, no updates, just an agonizing wait. Then, on January 16th, 2010, authorities get this anonymous tip that lead them to this rural road outside Los Mochis. There, hidden in a black plastic bag, was Jose's body. He'd been tortured, his hands and legs broken, and shot up all over the place. The condition of his remains showed he'd likely been killed soon after the kidnapping. Oh, the news hit hard. Journalists across Mexico were already operating in fear, but this was another level. Jose's murder wasn't just an attack on him. It was an attack on the press, on truth itself. It told every reporter.
If you talk, this could be you.
International organizations, including UNESCO, condemned the murder, calling it an assault on free expression. But in Mexico, justice was nowhere to be found. Like so many cases involving journalists, Jose's death went unpunished. To this day, his story stands out as a brutal warning. Speak out in cartel country, and you risk everything. Jose Luis Romero's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a silencing, and the echo of that silence still lingers today. January 20th, 2007, Villa Hermoso, Tabasco, Rodolfo Rincon Tarcena stepped out of the newsroom and into the shadows. He didn't know it yet, but someone had been watching. By morning, the veteran crime reporter had vanished, and what followed was pure horror. Known for his fearless reporting, Rodolfo was exposing drug dealers, naming names, and shining that light on the darkest corners of cartel activity in Tabasco. Just a day before he disappeared, he published a bold expose on narcotiendas, those little drug outlets popping up around town. He didn't hold back on this one, pointing out exact locations and even printing photos of suspected traffickers. That kind of reporting doesn't go unnoticed by the wrong people. In fact, Rodolfo had been receiving threats for a while, but this time felt different. A month before his disappearance, he tells his colleagues he's genuinely worried. And for good reason. Tabasco was boiling over. Rival cartels were fighting for turf, and public executions were becoming all too common. For over 3 years, there was no solid answer on his murder. Then, in 2010, came a chilling confession. 5 members of Los Zetas, one of the most brutal cartels at that time, admitted they kidnapped and murdered Rodolfo. According to their statement, they tortured him, cut his head off, and burnt his body in a metal barrel filled with diesel fuel. Authorities believe the charred remains they found way back in 2007 were his, but DNA tests were never conclusive. Even with the confession, people weren't fully convinced. Rodolfo's co-workers weren't buying it. They said the case didn't add up, especially with no clear DNA match and the convenient timing of the suspect's statements. Some journalists who spoke out about the investigation received threats of their own. What happened to Rodolfo isn't just about one reporter. It's part of this much bigger, darker story on the dangers of reporting on organized crime in Mexico. His murder marked a turning point, a loud, grim warning to journalists everywhere. And the worst part? It worked. Fear began to replace facts in newsrooms across the country. Rodolfo Rincon Tarcena stood up when the others had backed down. And while the cartels may have silenced his voice, they couldn't erase his legacy. He was one of the first, but sadly, not the last.